Right?
Yeah, that's
That's
okay.
like crazy. I can't believe it.
Good afternoon or evening and welcome to 5 p.m. joint work session of June 17th, 2025. Please note that all council members are present. We have a few things to review from the budget or from the regular session. Mostly as it regards to the budget. So I think Glenn's going to talk about that, but anything else that popped up in your review? All right, well, let's get Glenn up here to get us a rundown.
Hey, thanks. This was going to be even shorter, but we did get the certified tax rate this morning.
Oh, good.
But it came to the city late last week. We didn't see it in our office until this morning. And obviously with us not being here yesterday in the office, we really couldn't get anything ready for you to adopt tonight for the certified tax rate. So we do have it, but we're still having that scheduled for a couple of weeks from now where we can present that and you can adopt that certified tax rate. That doesn't really have any impact on the budget necessarily because they're already estimating the revenues and the new growth. But we did get the numbers and they sent those to us and they estimated a little high in the budget. So the numbers came in a little bit lower than they had anticipated. And what they had initially put in the budget as far as revenue from the previous year, it puts us off a little bit. Altogether around 900,000 short. But some of the preliminary suggestions from finance is that we don't need to make a change right now. We can either make a change mid-year once we really know all the numbers. But if you're interested in doing that, they had suggested a couple of places that we could adjust that. The problem is because we got it so late, we're not really prepared with amendment language or anything like that to really make that change tonight since it came in so late. So we're suggesting that you just go ahead and adopt the budget as is. We can have the conversations about the certified tax rate. We can make adjustments through the fiscal year if we need to when we see the finals come in. So they didn't seem concerned about it. It wasn't an issue that we were going to have right away. So we've got time to deal with that. But it did come in. It ticked down just a little bit. So last year's rate that we adopted. Let me see if I can get it here. And I'll cover this in the presentation too. So last year's was adopted at 0.002239. It came in at 0.002189. So it was just a little bit lower. So like I said, I'll talk a little bit about that in the certified tax rate in the presentation. But we did get that. So that's our plan now, is to have you adopt that in a couple of weeks.
We talk about how that happened. I thought we were supposed to stay whole plus growth.
Yeah, and
that was the way they would calculate the tax rate.
I'd have to defer to a finance person to explain that better, to really get into the details, and maybe we can do that in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
When we have a chance to talk about that.
Great, perfect.
All right.
So the city is made whole. It's just that's the number that it takes to make us whole. Does that make sense?
Not a hard.
If they left
off a million,
if they left us at the tax rate that we're at,
we'd have more money.
we'd have more money.
Right. But how can we stay whole if
More money than we have now.
right,
Yeah,
or had last year?
or had last year.
So how can we, if they adjust the tax rate to not exceed last year's property tax collection plus growth, how can we be off $1 million?
Well, it's partly from what was estimated from the year before that in estimated growth. So that kind of carried over, or property tax revenue. And then it's the new growth that they all show that also came in lower than they anticipated.
Okay,
Well,
we'll get
that
into it,
is
but yeah.
What they anticipate or what they project. And then when the actual numbers come in, that happened to be a little bit lower.
Okay. No, it will when we get into a little bit further.
Is there maybe if Lisa is available, maybe we can have a short, could you explain the difference that we've got with our certified tax rate numbers that we got today?
Yep.
And how that makes the budget whole, like.
And how we don't have the same amount of money we had last year.
No. we
This
do-
year, or projected, right?
We,
So we're guessing, when we go into the budget year, we guess. We guess what that new growth is gonna be. We feel like we've got it dialed in and then it's different than it has been. So we look at what the RDA areas that are gonna expire and we add the value that will come to the city. And then in our history has been, we've seen about 2% natural growth. So that was the first time we've been under projecting that last year. And I don't know if it's because value is I'm not sure why. I honestly am not sure how the assessor calculate. I mean, that's just a very complicated process. So we look at the final numbers and that's how we come up with the budget. As far as personal property, the value they give us this year, we actually won't, so the personal property taxes are due in March. We get the distribution in June. So the distribution we had last June was our current year personal property next year. So we're always off a year with personal property at the very least. So there can be some, if you look at the history of what we've budgeted to actual and then what we've collected, there are large swings between those. And it really comes down to personal property and that new growth estimate.
And define personal property tax for me. The stuff
I have a
within.
bunch of equipment to put in my factory.
Yep, okay, got it. Yeah. What I thought.
Yeah.
That amortizes.
It does amortize. So it'll go down and then people will invest
Yeah.
and it's very
Okay.
up and down.
Thanks.
Other questions about the budget?
Want to go over actions and sequencing in the meeting? Do you want to do that now or
Yes.
if there are any questions about that?
There's a lot of actions.
well, there's a lot of here.
There's a lot of hearings.
So, Janine, if that's okay. I'll
Yeah,
go
go
through-
for it, yeah.
Go through the public hearing. So the first one is the year-end adjustments for this fiscal year. So that one's pretty standard. Open the public hearing, close it when everybody's done, take action on that. Capital improvement plan is pretty much the same, so that'll be its own item with the hearing that you'll close and then take action. The next two, the enterprise fund transfers and the compensation for executive municipal officers, those will each have their own public hearing. So it'll be a presentation, public hearing, close the public hearing, but no action on both of those. And then for the budget, Janine will cover the council goals and guidelines, and I will cover the salary schedules in the budget. And then we'll have one public hearing for all of those, and then you can close that public hearing and take votes on all three of those. Okay. Maybe,
Why do we not have no action on the enterprise funds and the fiscal year compensation increases?
yeah, so those are the enterprise fund transfer public hearing is a state code requirement that happened, I think, what, 2017-ish? And it just requires a separate public hearing, so that item can be addressed on its own. But there's no action. Those transfers get approved with the budget. So that's the approval as a separate action, but they wanted a separate public hearing. And the municipal officers is the same kind of thing. That's a state code requirement. And last year was the first year for that. And it's the same. It just requires a separate public hearing, separate presentation. But any of those changes will be incorporated into the budget, the salary schedules and the staffing.
Thank you.
Is it too late to talk about something that we're gonna hear in the other room later, the capital improvement plan? Okay. It looks to me, and this is kind of confusing to me because there are a number of documents that drive all of this and timelines and monies and coming from different places, but It looks to me like the city council in a ranking of capital improvement projects had Lester Park number one. And now funding for Lester Park rated by the administration at 60 something. And no money allocated for this upcoming year for Lester Park. Grant money for pickleball courts and playground enhancements, but that's it. Is nothing gonna happen with Lester Park? I've been told that we're on the cusp of seeing a presentation of the new plan and the budget that goes with it, but it's all zeros. The community splash pad removed. No funding whatsoever, and it's not ranked. The amphitheater restrooms, I thought that was a priority last year when we sat in this room, and it was $200,000, and they're still the mess that they were a year ago. I'm just curious how these things got rearranged, or if I'm understanding this correctly.
Well, maybe I can take the CIP document itself. So that no funding is approved with the CIP document itself. So any of the funding would actually be approved with the budget. And I think there are other budget actions that put some other funding to some of those things. The CIP document itself is just recommending funding. And so when you approve that, you're approving the projects that are in that, but the budget action is a separate budget, if that makes sense. So even though there's no money shown in the CIP document, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a budget allocation for that
Within the fiscal year, okay?
Or sometimes what happens is if it's done in the current fiscal year, you may see grow in there because there's no money for the next year, even though there's some funding for it this year that carries over. So sometimes the funding part of the CIP is a little confusing that way. I don't know if that answered your question.
Where would I go to see if there's gonna be anything done with a splash pad, the restrooms, or Lester Park, for example?
I can check. I don't know off the top of my head where the funding is for that. I don't know. Steve, do you know where there budget amendments that dealt with that? Can you remember?
I believe there were with Lester Park, but yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have that, but I could try to find it quickly.
So I double checked, you questioned whether or not money for the property purchase here on the municipal block had been appropriated. And that's a correction I need to make. It has not been appropriated. You may recall that it was recommended for funding, but the council chose to take that. It was ARPA money. They moved ARPA money to police and public safety salaries. That salary money then went into the CIP,
Right.
but $1 million of that was actually approved for Lester Park, and that was in December. So my guess is they haven't spent much of that money.
Right.
Since it's, they're probably just getting into construction season.
I apologize. I don't have the numbers on me, but there has been quite a bit of money appropriated to Lester Park in the current year and earlier years. So we'll get that for you.
Thank
In
you.
the quarterly CIP report, the third quarter would have the most up-to-date numbers. So we'll get that for you, but there might have even been a budget opening since that. I can't remember. So we'll get you that number.
In addition, Lisa, could I request, there was, if I recall correctly, that money that was formally designated as ARPA money, that amount was approximately 8 million.
Mm-hmm.
And in an action in this room, we put that into its own account.
Yeah, it was in a allocated to future projects account.
Okay.
So it's sitting in the CIP fund. We did actually put it in the budget. There were three projects that we put it in there for fiscal year 26. So with the A1 tonight, if you want to pull them out, we can just do the carry forward and leave it as allocated to future projects. But it was the jail for 5 million, the All Abilities Park for $500,000, and Union Station
For
for
$1.5 million.
the rest of whatever the rest was.
The rest?
It seems.
And
like
that's in the A1?
No.
That's-
If you want to pull it, it's in the fiscal year 26 budget to be appropriated that way.
Should there not have been some kind of notification? Hey, we're going to allocate some of this money. I mean, I'm thinking it's still sitting there.
Well, it is still sitting there. The action that you would take tonight would allocate those, But I am suggesting if you want to pull it out.
Right,
I don't know that you've had a great discussion about it.
yeah, I really didn't understand that money was being allocated from future projects to 2026 projects, and I would like to have known that
Mhm.
before tonight.
Station is 2.
Okay, thank you.
So it's all gone.
Well, that's the proposal.
Okay, well, it would be all gone if we pass the budget tonight as it stands. And in this room, I made a point, that when we had small group meetings around Lester Park and the administration offered $1 million, I wasn't gonna push back
Mhm.
because we didn't have a budget and we didn't have a
And
plan.
that was appropriated.
Right, correct. I understand that. But I wasn't gonna push back and say, we need 3 million or we need 5 million of this ARPA money. Instead, knowing that there was remaining ARPA money, I wanted that set aside so that when the plan and the budget for Lester Park came in, if we were unable to do as much as we'd like to do, let's say in phase, then there's money laying in future projects to actually allocate to Lester Park. And it would have been helpful prior to now to know that your rainy day fund, Dave, for Lester Park has been allocated.
I apologize.
Okay, no problem. I'm just for future reference, if
We
we
probably
kind
should have caught that too, so I apologize on our behalf.
of, I'm glad that it came up tonight.
Yeah.
Well, council, where do we go from here with all that?
So Lisa, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So we put $1 million of that ARPA money towards Lester Park, correct?
It was a little over $1 million.
A little over $1 million,
I don't remember how much.
right?
Do you have the whole Lester Park?
Yeah, so the quarterly CIP report had, the balance as of the end of March was 1.3.
Okay,
So that's city money. That
Yep.
would include the ramp and everything else. So we'll have to get you a full accounting.
Yeah.
of Lester Park operations.
Was
Seems
just
like,
over $1 million. It was $1,042,000. For the ARPA.
for the ARPA money.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there was some other city money put in years past or something, right?
we've had
I want to say like
city money and ramp money.
ramp money, like
Yeah.
900,000.
So it was shy of 2 million
Yeah.
bucks.
That's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, I agree, Dave. I'm with you. I assumed we were like, but let's put it there and then have a discussion and then if needs be, there's money available, we can manipulate. So. Does that mean we need to pull it out?
So what's in there, and I apologize, I thought it was in there for an allocation to future projects. It is in there for the jail at 5 million.
We have,
All Abilities Park at 500,000.
I mean, we've had such a small discussion with that.
Yeah,
And
The station camp.
Union Station
Yeah,
of
I mean.
2 million, 2.5. Thank you.
yeah, there's been so little discussion about it's a priority. I mean, it's an important consideration, but we've had zero conversation on it in this room.
Yeah, and it might be a closed session discussion.
So we can
Do a motion.
just do a motion and pull that and put it in.
Just
But-
change the account to allocated to future projects would be
Allocated.
my suggestion.
What was the total number again on that?
8 million.
8 million.
I forget which park the All Abilities was gonna go in, Lisa, do you recall?
I think they're talking about doing it over by Big D.
Somewhere by the dinosaur park.
Yeah,
It'll
by
be
the
outside
river.
of the gates.
Okay, so this is the one that Sarah's.
I don't know.
Oh, that was.
There's the one
Uh,
inside, but then she
okay.
said there's supposed to be one outside. I don't know if it's Big D or by the dinosaur park,
Yeah,
somewhere down there.
Somewhere
Yeah, I
like that,
haven't seen the map.
Yeah,
okay.
Janine, can I?
because I was clarifying that the one they're having the ribbon cutting for now is inside the park, so you'd have to pay to get in there.
We have to pull the
But then
whole
they'll
8
also
million,
have another one somewhere.
just the 5 million that they're allocated.
Like, that's up to you.
So there are 3 line items in
Yep.
there. one for 5, one for the 2.5 for
then one
Union
for-
Station, and one for All Abilities Park. So based on what, we can come forward with a budget opening in July to reallocate them. My suggestion would be if you
At all.
want
Yeah.
discussion, let's move them all back to allocated to future projects. If you're comfortable with All Ability Parks, you can just move the 7.5 million.
Okay.
And I apologize. That's my fault. I should have caught that we hadn't had a discussion about that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Think that's it.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody.
All right, and you said 5.5 million.
Well, or 8. And which one with the All Abilities Park?
I don't think anyone has a problem.
I don't have
with all
a
abilities
problem with Park.
But it sounds like it's a simple,
Does
so I would almost do
let's have those discussions.
I would rather do the 8 and then have discussions and move forward
Yeah, I would.
all in one step, rather than piece it.
Mhm. All right.
Great.
Joe, you're up.
Awesome. It's good to be here with you tonight.
Looks delicious.
So what we're looking at, that's just recently gone to the Planning Commission is a partial street vacation of Stewart Drive in the BDO map. There. Kind of shows, we did kind of a 2-for-1 Planning Commission. They reviewed a subdivision plat and reviewed this partial vacation of Stewart Drive at the same time. And the intent of doing this is there's a need for additional building space in the BDO. It's growing quite a bit. And so there was some demolition of some older buildings there, some vacant lots just south of the Standard Examiner site. And those are currently being worked on for a newer building to meet those needs. This map in your packet kind of outlines, it's a very narrow strip of property. The BDO is unique. Not everything's platted. There are some streets and they're not technically platted. And as we develop new projects or do redevelopment, we kind of plat as we go. And that's what we're doing in this instance is having this portion platted. You can see the highlight in green. There's a road there, but it's not platted. And so the subdivision plat that the Planning Commission reviewed did a dedication with that plat to make that an official road. And the intent of the street vacation was to align with that plat. This is showing that it's kind of a half arrow shaped that is going to have a new building put on it. This is that strip. It's approximately about 5 feet of property to be vacated. And the intent behind this is to have the right of way align with the existing infrastructure on the road. So sidewalks and all of that is consistent. Just to point out, we've had this reviewed by engineering, and as long as we're maintaining a minimum of 54-foot right of way width there, we're going to be meeting the requirements of the planned streets needed in the BDO for this section of road. The vacation also provides some additional space to work this building on this lot. Everything kind of narrows down, as you can see on to the right, which would be like the southeast portion of the property, and trying to get trucks to be able to maneuver in the back there and meet that spacing, and having the parking separated from that in front of the building. and meeting the setbacks. This allows those setbacks to be met as well. So that's the good reason for it, the request, and why we're pursuing it. The commission did review it. They did give approval 8-0. The condition was that we wanted a good legal description of that road, because there was some discussion of back and forth of how we need to align that road with engineering staff. We have received that final legal description, which has been reviewed and approved by staff. So with that, we have the recommendation to you to approve. That's all I have.
Would you mind going back to the first map really fast? I was pulling it up on the real,
On
Yeah.
the
yeah, maybe that one. Thank you.
Wow.
Just so I can see where it is. Yeah, thank you. Mhm. I like to look at real life too.
yeah, you go for it. Any questions?
You had questions about sidewalks and stuff in the meantime.
I got answered that. There, none of the public infrastructure that's already in place is gonna be affected, right?
No, there is been some concern about some of the trees that have been back in where the building's going, but not on the infrastructure on the road.
Sidewalks, road, it's all gonna be.
It'll all be retained. The BDO has, not just in this site, but been doing some water-wise landscaping in the park strips out in the industrial park, and so that'll continue, but yeah, there's really no changes. Kind of platting what is there and having it make sense. So.
And Joe Boyer is building this building, is that correct?
They're the applicants.
And do they have a tenant already?
I'm not aware of a tenant. And all I've been kind of providing, we have been doing a site plan review. Right now, it's just kind of a shell building, which is our it's a typical design out there now, but they've had, I know they've had several companies that needed spaces, and this is to kind of help be able to market that and provide those spaces in the BDO.
So as a part of that, is the infrastructure already approved, like for power? And because that power sometimes it gets to be a problem out at BDO.
Yeah, so that is all been looked at and it's being reviewed with the subdivision plat, which they're in the process of finishing up right now. So, yeah, there's been a lot of coordination that's had to occur for sure. And they've talking with Aaron and Cameron, with Boyer, they've worked on that several times with the standard examiner building the adjacent property, and they've been able to work out, all the act needed for their site.
Questions for Joe?
When do we hear this?
July 1st, I think.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Else? Thank you. Here.
Thanks, Joe.
Looks like it's been forever.
It has been.
All right, next up is Barton.
Look, working on. I'm gonna get that job this year.
Hey, good afternoon, city councilors. This is a request for a zoning ordinance amendment on our landscaping requirements for single family homes. So let me give you a little background of why this is coming to you. I just pulled this off the official website today. This map shows where in the state we're currently experiencing drought, and currently in 83% of the state, there's a drought. We are lucky, we are in the area that's only abnormally dry, which I think as we look in the future, abnormally dry is gonna be more like normally dry. So in the past few years, we've had a lot of problems and we're still in this cycle. And you can see one of the effects that's had has been on the Great Salt Lake. I think the picture on the left is more like 84.
It was pumping it.
Yeah, when we were pumping it out in the desert. And then on the right is, I think about a couple of years ago when the Great Salt Lake hit one of the record lows. And you see the effects that this has had, and there's a lot of concerns about what that will do to the exposed land and how that'll kick up dirt and winds and lots of effects on that. And the Great Salt Lake has a lot of effects. This is a matrix that says some of the effects that lake levels have on wildlife, on recreation, on safety, on wetlands, on land use, on the economics, and clear that a low Great Salt Lake has negative effects on many of those characteristics. So what has the city done? We've been proactive on these things. We have created a water-wise landscape ordinance that applies to mostly to multifamily, commercial, and industrial uses. We have the Flip Your Strip program. Been doing a lot of improvements to city operations, just in how we water parks and parkways and other facilities. And then there's the 36-inch water line in Ogden Canyon. A little background on that. That was constructed in 1935. It provides a critical role in supplying water to Ogden City, and it supplemented the 24-inch line that was installed in 1915. And this is a picture of what it looks like, which you can see it's a problem. It's decayed, a lot of holes, a lot of leaking water through the canyon. So I think it's recognized the number one thing we can do to save water is fix our leaking pipes, and this is the biggest leaking pipe that we have.
Is that a concrete pipe?
Yes, there's part that's concrete, and I think the 24 is metal, but
Well, it's poly now, but
yeah.
I didn't know that was concrete.
So how do these fit together? There is a connection, and this is the idea that could a pipeline, fixing the canyon pipeline, actually help the Great Salt Lake? So we put two together and got a deal with the state that they would give us a grant for $10 million to fund the pipeline improvements to fix the pipeline through the canyon. There were some conditions of that grant agreement. That was we would have to put 1,500 acre-feet annually to the Willard Spur. So you take some of the water we save and put it out to the Willard Spur to help with wildlife and water levels in Great Salt Lake. And a second condition of the grant is we had to adopt a water efficient landscaping ordinance for new single family dwellings. So that's why we're here today. So the agreement says that this ordinance shall state that no more than 35% of the landscaped area in the front and side yard of a residential dwelling can be natural turf grass. So that's what we have to do in order to qualify for the grant. So you want 10 million reasons why to adopt this ordinance. That's 10 million reasons. So our proposal is that to add this language, new single family dwellings where a building permit is applied after May 1st, 2025 shall be limited to a maximum of 35% of the total landscape area in turf in the front and side yard facing a street on a corner lot and side yard. So meeting the grant requirements. And while we're in that section, we are making a few housekeeping changes. This is my illustration. When we did the last code amendments, we kind of accidentally threw the baby out with that water a little bit on the code. So we adopted our waterwise landscape ordinance that says specifically for single family homes, what kind of plants you use, what kind of irrigation you use, you know, how you can water it, what kind of mulch you use, how deep the mulch is, all these details. We somehow left out like how much you have to actually landscape. And so really, if you want to do it mostly in rock, you can. So that was kind of an inadvertent change. So we are fixing that so that you really, the intention was not to allow just all rock in your yard. And all rock has some issues. One, it adds a lot of heat. Rock gets hot, and then you end up, you know, increasing your air conditioning and other things in your house. Just the aesthetics of it, trying to make an attractive neighborhood. And it really isn't low maintenance. You're required to do a lot of maintenance on when you do rock. So we're amending it. What we really intending to do is require that you do at least 50% of the landscape area is covered by living plants. So kind of put together on this typical yard, you can do grass in your front yard, but there's a maximum of 35%, and then 50% minimum living ground cover. So you can do like shrubs in a planter, and you can do rocks. So this is a kind of an example of where you could do all three, but you do have to have landscaping in there. Another little thing we end up was people say, hey, I want to do just waterwise landscaping. It's going to be just rock. And we can see what, is that really landscaping, or is that just a part of their driveway? So one thing we propose to add is that if you have that kind of area, you have to do some sort of barrier between your, you know, your rockscape landscape area and the driveway, so you aren't just using it for parking, something as plants or fencing or boulders or something like this. This is an example. I think that they've done a good job. You know, you wouldn't be parking in that room just because of the arrangement of plants and boulders there. There's a little technical thing about financial guarantees that, you know, if the weather's bad, you can delay landscaping, which is pretty common. So, and put together some of the goals to provide an adequate quality water supply to all Ogden City water customers, and we believe this will do it, especially since it'll add, you know, $10 million to improve the water line. One of the goals is neighborhoods in which residents are involved in creating safe, livable, and attractive environment. And so the requirement would be to still require some landscaping in neighborhoods. So it can be water-wise, but it's not the all rock sort of landscape. So some of the questions in the packet, would this ordinance qualify Ogden to take advantage of Weaver Basin's landscape lawn exchange program? The answer is no, it would not. There are strings attached to that. The ordinance would have to go a lot further in order to qualify for that. And, you know, we brought that up with the city administration and with planning commission, and there were some things that in that weren't willing to go that far. One of the requirements, one thing we were really comfortable with the grant agreement was this applies prospectively to new single family residential dwellings. It doesn't require you to go back to old single family dwellings. In order to qualify for the landscape lawn exchange program, it would not allow, if you had like an existing home that has, you know, rocks or things like that, it doesn't allow you to go back and put turf in there. And the planning commission felt like if a family wanted to, you know, go back and put in turf, that they should be allowed that. There were some other technical things like the Weaver Basin requirement would never allow you to put turf in a park strip. And we actually have some very wide park strips. Some places it's 10, 15, 20 feet wide. And A very narrow park strip is very water inefficient because there's really no way to put in sprinklers without watering the sidewalk. But if you have a 12-foot wide park strip, you can do that efficiently. So there are some exceptions like that we're just, again, administration of the Plan Commission weren't willing to go that far. Another question is just on enforcement. Yeah, enforcement's always an issue whenever we do these things. And we think this ordinance will actually clarify the ordinance so that it's clear what the standards are we're enforcing. And just to put in there that enforcement doesn't always mean someone going to give you a ticket. We have had really great partnerships with things like groups like my hometown Ogden, where they can, that's one thing they often do is help property owners, put in water-wise landscaping, low maintenance landscaping, and landscape that would meet those standards.
Let me ask a question before, and you might be answering this, but as far as enforcement goes, so it says it'll start in May and we're in the middle of June. So has anybody gotten a permit for new single family homes in the meanwhile that wouldn't fit, or we've run into that problem recently where we pass an ordinance, people already have a permit and then they're getting kind of retro.
I haven't checked to see if we've got any in that interim.
Might be worth it because they may not know about this ordinance, but
Yeah.
and then also I was wondering, as you were saying, so there's a lot of people that do just have rocks right now. So would this would it apply to them?
They could continue to have their just rocks.
Okay,
Because our current ordinance doesn't,
Right.
that's a bummer. There's a
Yeah.
lot of them.
I thought our current ordinance says that we have to
I
have.
thought we had to have material.
You have to have, it has to be landscaped, but it isn't clear how much living material you have there. So if you have a few plants, you probably meet our current code.
But if you have none,
If you have none, you would be in violation,
Based on this code or on the current?
on the current code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. So I'm gonna say that's gonna get really confusing. It's gonna be like the painted brick, like, well, they have all rocks.
Yeah.
And I have all rocks. Like,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, but at least the proposal would not require them to go back.
And just for everybody's information, right, you are required to get a permit to do hardscaping, right, which is rocks.
Yes,
So
or landscaping your front yard, you gotta
get a permit, so,
It is a
Do that.
use permit, but
yeah, people should do that so they know what's appropriate.
yep.
Or, sorry,
Go ahead, Rich.
I maybe we're gonna ask about the same thing, but the Weaver Basin's grant program to help people convert their lawn. I think we need a deeper discussion about that. I've talked to some of those Weaver Basin guys, and I think they're just kind of the enforcement of the legislature's thing, aren't they? Isn't that really how it all came down?
Well, they have grant funds that they give out.
Right.
And so they have to enforce what the legislature's strings on those grant funds are. And they've created their own strings too.
We do live in a desert, and I've had a little discussions with people about how we use water. And we have gotten into it's our culture that we build a house and plant grass. And we always plant Kentucky bluegrass or some variety of that does require a lot of water. I know as we're converting farmland to homes, homes don't use as much water as we does that's irrigated, at least.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is we're putting a lot of people in here, and we're still growing. Our climate is changing to some extent where we're suffering from not as much water as we once did.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we'd better get ahead of this thing and start to look at something that's a little bit more sustainable. So that we don't find ourselves in a year like we did a few years ago. Hey, don't water your lawn, let it go dry. Where if people only had a smaller amount of turf. And some of those things were really pretty. I know that's more expensive to do. But it's not nearly as painful when you have to cut back. I think we need to have that discussion. I really do. So that, you know, people who do already have a lot of turf can get some help to convert it. And right now it's on your own, or, you know, cause we can't apply for the grant. So, you know, you've kind of given us broad strokes, but I think we need a discussion where we can talk about more specifics.
I've had people ask me about it, and I also think that would open the door then for the people that don't have sidewalks. Right?
Yeah.
Because right now, we don't have anything to offer them.
Right. And I think that when I talked with Matt last, he was saying that this Flip Your Strip program was kind of, we can see the end of that thing coming somewhere. I don't think that's gonna go on forever.
Yeah, that we'll run out. I know the city's money is finite, so we'll run out of that.
Mhm.
Beaver Basins could also run out.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what you think about that. Is, you know, what do we have to do
We
about
can,
that?
we can we'll look at that and make sure that we can get something together,
Okay, that'd be good.
schedule it.
Martin, I was gonna ask, at what point are you planting a tree in your front yard, and when does that become landscaping requiring a permit?
It is. Yeah, you can do it. It's landscaping that requires permit.
So if you're gonna plant a tree, spring flowers, I mean, you know, I know I'm being a little unrealistic, but at what point is that permit required?
Yeah.
Like catch.
And is there a point where an existing home, which is grandfathered in, as I understand it, is there a point when that house is renovated and maybe a significant addition is added where it does fall under this ordinance and it would require? You know, we got some houses that are being renovated and doubled in size.
Yeah.
So is there a point where that sort of activity would require this ordinance to come into play?
This ordinance only would apply to new single family. So if you're tearing it down and starting over,
That would be
do it.
cool.
But if you're,
Okay, but it's just a significant addition, no problem.
No.
Okay.
as it's written, it doesn't apply.
Okay.
And I don't know, Joe, is there a bottom limit on a land use permit for landscaping?
We've not had one. I think we've always seen the land use permits as a tool to help people come in and understand the code. We've never gotten crazy with spring flowers or things like that, but when someone's going from like turf to a xeriscape or xeriscape, you know, then we typically have them come in and get one so we can explain the code and what they need to do to meet it.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done a permit for a tree.
No, I've never done one.
Technically, you're not even supposed to prune your street trees. But everybody does, you know, it's.
I don't have any.
Oh, no,
did.
Yeah. Well, you can do that.
Actually, I might
Actually, you're required to keep
have a tree in the right of way.
It's people who top them, but
Right? Any-
you know, one other question was about education. Actually, Weaver Basin has some great resources for anybody who wants to learn how to landscape. You know, they have classes, they have online classes, they have in-person classes. And we will do more advertising of this. You know, we do regularly things like Add Your Service, and so we will be out educating it. So yeah, the planning commission's heard this and they recommend adopt it. Give you 10 million reasons why you should. Yes. Recommend that you. The planning commission's recommending you adopt it.
You're time sensitive on this.
We have this scheduled for
July
July 15th.
I know the state is,
Up in their toe.
yeah, we can't get reimbursed until we get this adopted, so it's starting to, yeah, get more pressing, so.
I would really appreciate if we would look to see if anybody applied for a new home in the meanwhile. And
Yes.
At least inform them or figure out what that process will be for them
Yes, we'll do.
before they do their yard and have to
Yes.
redo the whole thing.
Again, right?
Yeah, just in cases.
All right, any other questions for Barton? Good. Do
Thank you.
you have any council business?
Question about
Yeah.
the Utah 250. I don't know if you saw the notes. There's this America 250. They're looking for, you're interested in it?
Yeah.
Is anybody else interested? Okay, Mara, Rich is interested in the America Utah 250, so Luis will Luis Lopez is kind of working that project, so he'll be in contact with you.
I can just say a couple more things really quick about that, we'll have a resolution, like a joint resolution on that we'll be transmitting shortly. And then the county commission is also doing a resolution as well. So we'll have a single committee for the county and the city. Yeah, anyway, so that just kind of like the plan will be working that forward. So
Great.
I think it should be great. So we'll get that to you shortly. But thank you for your interest.
Anything else to do?
I have.
Yeah, just,
I had a question. I got an email from somebody on 28th Street, and they asked me to vote to approve the four-way stop at 29th and Polk. I've never heard anything about a four-way stop at 29th and Polk.
That we would especially vote on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that was Sarge's proposal, and she came in with that petition with signatures. And there was a traffic count done on 29th. It was completed, and the traffic engineer went through the numbers, and it was determined that it didn't warrant a four-way stop, so there won't be one going there.
Yeah. I didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
you're like, no, wait.
Yeah, I'm like, why didn't you see it? But
hey, I just want to talk a little bit about, I don't know if you're getting calls or anything from citizens about immigration and ICE. And I want to talk a little bit about this issue a little bit in that, this is something that's happening to us because there's like decades of failed federal leadership that hasn't dealt with immigration, both Republican and Democrat sides. So it's now coming back and falling on us. And I've spent the last week talking to citizens and law enforcement and other elected officials, trying to figure out what they're doing as a council. And since we're talking about the budget, and I'm trying to wrap my head around how can I speak about this on this issue, based on what I'm seeing. And I'm just really worried that if OPD is going to engage in any federal law enforcement, that it becomes something that's taking them away from their normal work, and it's taking them away from the great work that they're already doing and keeping our citizens safe and watching our crime rates go down. And many of we've spent years and years and years trying to figure out how to get their salaries up so that we actually have really competitive salaries. And I don't want to see that diminish because they're off doing and not focused on what we're asking them to do as a city. And I'm really thankful for what they're doing. And I know I'm speaking for myself and not as a council, but if they start to do things outside of their scope and outside of the work that they've been hired to do for our city and keep our city safe, I really think that this becomes a bit of a budget issue, and I can't support it from if administration wants to make a change. I just can't support it because I think it really becomes a budget issue. So I throw that out there as It's been a long weekend, talking to a lot of people, and I know, Ken, you've done the same, and, because I'm coming on the heels of some of the conversations you're having, so. I'm sure, Angela, you've had those.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what I'm
as
hearing
well.
is just some some clarity is one, and I appreciate the messages that were put out by the administration and by the council. It's just, that's the challenge, and I think, in these times, it's so confusing because we have heard stories, and I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, like, someone called me because there's like a van on the corner with people that have police on the back. And again, I don't think they're Ogden police officers. That wasn't indicated at all, but it's sort of this issue of not knowing who the enforcement people are,
Right.
how we're involved as a city, and I think that would help clarify for residents too, just to know. I mean, again, we've heard stories, and I can't verify them or not, that some people, they're not really identifying themselves when people get pulled over or taken away too. And so I think that's some of the fear and the frustration from communities is, they don't know. It could be anybody that would stop you that maybe say they're the police or say they're from ICE, and if they're not showing identification or something, then that's a big challenge, and whether you're supposed to follow their orders or not, I mean, that makes it really confusing. I think that's what I'm just hearing is, and I know that we only have a certain role to play in these spaces, but I think that that's just what I'm hearing is people are confused and concerned. They just don't know if it starts happening here in any of those ways. What is it we can do about it, or what can we ask?
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I was trying to figure out a solution, and I think the one solution that I came up with is that there's definitely a budget role that we play and an overarching policy, and I don't know how to do the policy one without the help from administration, but I do know that there is something that we can do on the budget side, or at least I would push to have that happen. So if that started to happen, I don't think that it's happening as well, and
I don't know, it's just, I don't know.
I don't know.
A lot of people are really frightened and they're just staying home, so.
Yeah, and so if it is a budget thing, are you suggesting that the administration would come to us and say, we're looking to change the relationship or the mission of the police department? And as a result of that, that's going to affect their mission and how monies were budgeted for that mission? And as a result, the administration comes back to council and gains public input for a change of mission and that sort of thing?
Well, at least for the budget side.
Yeah, budget.
I think it's confusing though too, because we certainly, and the police officer certainly too, would follow state and federal law. So it's the,
Right.
kind of crossing over into that space as if they're actually doing work or, working with in a certain way, to your point. Is that allocating time away from their regular responsibilities or something?
Yeah, and in my study, I've found that there are two agreements that a local law enforcement community can enter into. At least, and one is a 287G and the other one is a warrant service officers
Yeah.
agreement. So that really puts local law enforcement in a position to follow some direction as provided by ICE. And in talking to a counterpart who's a city councilor in Grand Junction, Colorado, it is state law prevents any municipality from signing either one of those agreements where they enter into a relationship with ICE. It's just against the law. However, that incident where the University of Utah young woman was stopped near Loma, Colorado by a deputy sheriff. And the deputy sheriff suggested that she was stopped because she was following a semi-tractor trailer too closely. And then he commented when she presented a driver's license that, I mean, she was questioned about where are you from and how long have you been in this country, and your driver's license looks like it's a fake. She answered his questions to his satisfaction and she was released. And by the time she left Fruita, Colorado, continued west on I-70 and got to Loma, Colorado, which is just prior to the Utah border, she was pulled over by ICE. And what they've learned in Colorado is there is a linked communication between local law enforcement, sheriffs, state patrol, ICE, and other federal authorities that is circumventing this law that forbids the engagement of local law enforcement in federal immigration issues. And I'm curious as to whether that's happening here. Are ICE people, do they know what's going on in Ogden? If an Ogden, so in other words, that sheriff tagged that young woman and ICE stopped her and said, "You're it." And they took her to Aurora, Colorado, which is east side of Denver. And now they've got a GoFundMe page set up. There are going to be legal fees that she's got to deal with, transportation to that location to attend hearings. She's going to have lost income as a result. This is serious stuff.
And her family's car was, they can't get the car back. Yeah.
Was it?
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to whether we're in some loose manner communicating with ICE. And I wonder too, do we have an ICE office here?
Yes,
We do have a facility. Where is it, Sean?
out west.
We, is
We is in Weber County.
It's
Ogden.
in Weber County. I don't think it's in Weber County. I think, but I'm not sure.
Sorry, yeah, do you know me?
we got to get into.
My wife's been there several times. I
What
don't
are we
think.
talking about? Can I have some input? I don't know what's.
Oh, no, we're just asking questions about what's going on.
Thanks. I get a lot of questions about it from constituents. It's a big deal.
I do think we need to be careful that we're not just spreading rumor and innuendo. I don't know if that helps anybody anytime.
No.
I appreciate you, so you can't verify things. I think things that can't be verified, we probably ought to not.
Well, I saw the van on my block and my neighbors
Sure.
called me and said, hey, do you know
I'm
who
not-
that is in the van? No, and I hear what you're saying, but you know, they didn't say it was Ogden Police Department. But to me, I was like, well, it could be the parole, adult probation and parole. That's what they look like. They don't have marked cars, and they do, when they go check on people, they do have those vests on that say police on the back. But that was just my speculation. You know, I was like, I don't know if it would be ICE or,
Or several months ago, somebody was,
oh, yeah,
it was offered that the sheriff and our chief might come and do a
Yeah.
presentation.
I think that's a great idea.
And I think it's a very good idea.
I think the answers are.
Yeah, so just the clarity.
They can be real answers and
No
not,
speculation.
I heard this and he said that, so.
Yep.
All right, we're adjourned from the work session.
Cheers.